you'll see as this video goes on, this cooking demonstration, that there may be some Italian Americans out there that would look at this and say, well, that's not a traditional ingredient, or that's not a traditional ingredient. But I think that one of the things that's important to recognize is that the evolution of what we think of as Italian American cooking is really an amalgamation of several different regional styles. So today we are going to make a sort of semi-traditional Sunday sauce in Southern Italian cooking. And as what eventually became as Italian American cooking, it was very common for people to have a communal meal, even going back centuries, on Sunday. And one of the cornerstones was usually spaghetti and meatballs. So it was a long simmered sauce that was different than the typical tomato sauces that were served during the week, which were very often just very simple crushed tomatoes, maybe some garlic and some olive oil and a little bit of cheese, and that's what was tossed with pasta and then served with bread, and then later in the meal maybe fruit and wine. So to begin our Sunday sauce, which is the long cooked sauce, we start with a pan and a little bit of olive oil in it. Let that get a little bit warm under, kind of a medium heat. And most of the components, at least of my family's version of this from a meat standpoint, were pork-related products. They were the lesser cuts. One of the things that's commonly used was pork neck bones and pig's feet, which you'll see we're going to use some of that. But any kind of bone-in pork product, like a pork steak or a pork chop, is a great start to the base of this sauce because it lends a lot of flavor, and as the slow cooking process goes, it starts to break up and add it's like little flavor components to the body of the sauce. And we're going to just start that in the oil. And we add a little bit of a few grains of pepper, kosher salt. And we'll let that go for a bit, and it will get that good and browned on the underside. See if it'll release yet. Not quite yet. Almost. That's a good indication if the meat is developing a good, what chefs refer to as a fond or a caramelization of the meat on the base of the pan. It'll often release a little bit easier when it's actually ready to turn. Stainless steel pans don't work like nonstick pans, so the good news is they're durable as far as stirring things go. They're not so good about having the food release, but we'll see if we can't get this to turn now. Now we're getting a little color on that meat. We're going to repeat our salt and pepper on this side. And we're going to let that go just a little bit longer. So now we add, this is onion and garlic that's been diced. I like to add the dry spices, the basil, the oregano, the fennel seed, the crushed red pepper, and the bay leaves. And I like to let that go for a little period of time to allow those to start releasing some of their aromatic quality. Away we go on that. Now in the meantime, while that's continuing to cook a little, I've gotten this oil just a little hot. This is a spicy Italian sausage. I will put meatballs and sausage in my sauce. I like to use the spicy sausage. It's not that spicy. But then that's sort of the people that are lovers of heat, it can be sort of directed to them. They know they can get a little extra burst if they want by having some of the sausage. Next ingredient into the main sauce, a pig's foot that's been halved. You can see it is mostly just cartilage and fat and tendon and that. And you think, well, how good can that be? Well, we are going to fish this out after this is cooked a while they're still intact before they fall completely apart, because it is a little bit harder to eat the sauce with all of the components of this mixed throughout. But this will add a lot of flavor, and it will also add some glycerin and some body to the sauce from all the cartilage in the hook. And the idea is just to let the onion and garlic and the dried herbs, just kind of cook for a little bit, just to kind of take the sharpness out of the onion. Start releasing the aromatic qualities of that. We've got our Italian sausage browning nicely in the pan. We've got our onions and garlic have cooked down just a little bit. So now it's time to add our tomato components. I used crushed tomatoes, all-purpose, no additional seasoning in them. Petite diced tomatoes. I like the petite diced better than just the regular diced, because the regular diced can have quite a bit. The size of them is so big sometimes that it's a little bit much for a single bite. I use tomato juice. I don't use any paste or anything. I like this Capodice. It's an organic tomato juice. It's twice as expensive as other types of juice, but it's also very good. But I also use good old-fashioned Campbell's. I don't use the low sodium variety. I'm sure that's healthier. I gotta tell you, it doesn't taste near as good either though. So sometimes I'll just pour some of that out and then make sure I shake it again. These juices tend to settle just like orange juice does. You want to make sure you get all those tomato solids and sludge that are at the bottom. And that is, give that sausage another little twirl. Many times it's not necessary to put any oil in the pan if the sausage renders enough of its own. This sausage is actually kind of a dry sausage. It doesn't have a real high fat component, so it just browns a little better. So now we're going to give this a little stir. Now comes parsley, a good amount. The olives, again optional. Fresh mushrooms, also again optional. The Parmesan rinds. And we're going to give a few grinds of some black pepper. These mushrooms will float until they start really getting along in their cooking process, and then they will just essentially fall into the sauce and become part of the body of the sauce. The mushrooms themselves give up some liquid, so the sauce needs to cook down for a while, hence the Sunday sauce regimen of essentially cooking all day. Very often when I make this sauce, I cook it a good part of one day, and then into the next day I'll often make it this time of year or later when it's cool enough outside to use the outdoors as a refrigerator. If you put a big pot of sauce like this in your refrigerator that's hot, it will warm up the entire refrigerator. But I like to do it, like I said, I like to do it now when it's 35 degrees overnight, and I just set it outside. I weight down the lid so animals don't get into it, and that ends up being the most effective way. Now people do, you can cool it down in an ice bath and then put it in your refrigerator, which is fine. It's just more of a hassle. This sauce here tends to freeze really well, so there's nothing wrong with making a batch and portioning it out in the containers and going ahead and freezing it. Once it's thawed and eaten, it's absolutely the same. I don't think it deteriorates at all, even for months and months. So that is the base of the sauce. I will often, after I've cooked it, I will taste it the next day. I always grate some Italian cheese into the sauce itself. I use Reggiano. I use sharp provolone. And then I usually will use some type of either Pecorino Romano or Locatelli, which is just a sharper form of the same cheese. So these two cheeses, the provolone and the Parmesan, are actually cow's milk cheeses. The Pecorino is actually a sheep's milk cheese. Even though none of those are really from southern Italy, but southern Italy, the cheeses were often made from sheep's milk or goat milk. Cows were really a type of livestock. They didn't have a lot of them. It was because of the sparsity of the grazing land. The meagerness of the grasses that grow down there because of the intense heat really didn't lend well for cows to graze. So these other animals were used more often, raised and used for their milk production for cheese. We all know that or many of us know that northern Italy and southern Italy had very different staples with which they cooked with. Northern Italy, rice was one of the staples, or polenta, as a base, and in southern Italy was pasta. The northern Italians tended to use more dairy and eggs and maybe even butter in some of their dishes, where the southern Italians used very little of that. But southern Italy, it was tomatoes and cheese and pasta and bread and maybe some garlic and other aromatics that were available, and often very much a vegetable-based diet. We've got our sausage that's well browned. We're going to put those in now. It's not cooked through, so it's not something you would just want to take out of the pan and eat right now. But over the next few hours, as that sauce comes up to temperature and simmers, and that it'll cook that sausage through, and that sausage will lend a lot of flavor to the sauce. Meatballs are also something that is very much an evolved recipe based on different families. Some people use ground pork, some use ground veal, some use ground beef, some use combinations of that, some use sausage actually in it. And I'll kind of show you my own little version. So I do start with two parts ground chuck, ground Italian sausage. This is some chopped pepperoncini and green olive. The pepperoncini, I would say, is non-traditional. The green olive is actually common. Sauteed onion and garlic. Breadcrumbs from Italian bread. A chopped mixture of Italian cheese. That's a lot of the same cheeses. It is the same cheeses I just showed you. Parsley. Basil. Oregano. A little bit of garlic powder. Some egg beaten with a little bit of milk as a binding agent. A fresh ground pepper. And then something I do is I use some of the sauce that we're cooking, and it's okay to put it in there cold, to just moisten. There's no way to do this other than just to get in there and do it. So you're trying to mix all of these ingredients together. And then we just portion it to whatever size you want. Some people like really large meatballs. They like them tennis ball size. Some people like really small ones, more like golf ball size. I use an ice cream scoop, which I have right here. Help get the size. I just kind of let it be a little bit over that. I don't work them a lot. This dish that we're making, when they pulled Italian-American families in the late 1930s, now think about this, 100% of the Italian families in the late 30s here in the United States were making spaghetti and meatballs at least one day a week. So that was the dish. Now there were pastas of other sorts and sauces, that were still tomato based, that would bear, in components bear some resemblance to what we're just showing you today. But as far as the actual dish, this was it. This was the traditional family meal. So the people that have got a lot of energy will fry these in meatballs. Sometimes they'll roll them in breadcrumbs and fry them in olive oil. They get an awesome crisp exterior, and they're really good. I usually just put mine in a convection bake oven at kind of a higher temperature. So this is going in at 370, and we'll let them cook for about 15 or 20 minutes. And so there are the meatballs as they've come out of the oven. I cheated and made another pot of sauce yesterday. So this is just like the cooking shows, we can see what the final product looks like. So here it is. And you can see where this originally started way up here, and it's cooked down that far. But then contrast that to where we are here. where you can see this is just a much more raw sauce. It just hasn't had any chance to really cook and really develop flavors. So many people cook pasta, and the first thing they want to do is rinse a bunch of water on it, and there is surface starch on those noodles that will actually help the sauce stick to it, and you just rinse that away. My dad says that his sauce wasn't the same as his mother's sauce. My sauce is definitely not the same as my father's, but there's been sort of a building on these flavor components and traditions that have become the kind of the fabric of our family's sauce. So cook with what you like, and try a hand at making a good traditional Italian Sunday sauce.